Hey everybody, it's Reggie here. I'm going to talk to you about a podcast you're going to listen to in about a minute with the wonderful Susi O'Neill. Who is Susi, I hear you ask? Well, she is an author. She is a writer who's just launched a new newsletter on Substack, which you can hear about in the podcast, as well as being a consultant who helps organizations with a people first approach when it comes to technology. She has won numerous awards and she has a wonderful insight in terms of AI and technology in general and the impact it has for business as well as legislation and things that you should be aware of. It's a great podcast and it's the second one that we did. We did one last year back in October and it has a huge amount of interest. So I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Susi, hi. How are you?
I'm grand, thank you, Reggie. It's fantastic to be back on Perspectives again and joining you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. We had a very, very good session last time. We talked about, so many weird and wonderful things centered around AI. And as the old saying goes, a week is a long time in politics, but in AI, my goodness me.
It's a lifetime. I've just been writing about this in my newsletter. It feels like last year was a Paleolithic period, and it does feel like things are moving on. The hype cycle does not stop right now.
It really
politics
doesn't.
And technology are interweaving very, very closely, and for better or worse, that is hitting businesses right now today.
Indeed, they are intertwined, and everyone's trying to make hay out of it. And you can see this in history all the way through. People are going to try and, everything from, snake oil to you name it, it's all been done. So we're going to get straight into it. There's been a lot going on. And I'm going to kick off with something that's getting away from the hype cycle a little bit, but something that's actually something I read about today. So it's hot off the press. It is McKinsey have done a massive report, as they do, God love them. And they have been talking about AI in the workplace and why the adoption of AI has been very low. And they're saying it's not that people don't want to do it. Its leadership is failing. So the board, they don't really know where to start. They know they've got to do it. And though they can see, there was a great line in it, people can see the long-term benefits of AI, but it's the short-term they're struggling with. And where do they start? So, as I say, it's a report that was out today. There's a huge potential. Only 1% of companies have really got any type of policy in terms of actually how they're going to do it. It's all very disparate. What are your thoughts on that? I know you work in that place.
Yeah, I haven't read this report yet, but that does chime with a lot of the other pieces that have come out from Gartner and Microsoft reports, including a lot of these organizations have got very vested interest because they're selling consulting services and selling technologies. So they want to get ultimately an outcome from a lot of this research that people are adopting and it's going well, but there are a lot of gaps. So just always bear in mind who is commissioning that work.
Indeed.
But I see like two different polarizing forces. So on the one hand, when you interview the CEOs and the World Economic Forum research that's come out more recently, we start to see that the leadership, and particularly the bigger enterprises, Fortune 500s and FTSE 100s around the world, the leaders are saying, yes, absolutely, we're on board with AI, we're training everyone, we're going to reduce headcount and increase profit. And that's a message to shareholders more than anything. We are on top of this technology. We're not Luddites. We're not behind the curve. We're doing this. Now, those individuals making those statements and a lot of that C-suite, they're not even users of AI technologies. They have no technical understanding. Well, some obviously do, like perhaps the CTO or the CISOs. Cool. But on the ground, they're not users. So they're just coming up with blanket statements saying these things. We see a disparation between that and the actual uptake and planning. Another piece of research I saw last year showed that only 1 in 5 organizations have any kind of training plan for AI adoption. So they may have bought the tools and licenses. Thank you, Microsoft, for selling in your bundles. But only 4% of CIOs said that they found Microsoft Copilot any good. And they were considering cancelling their pilots and tests because of uptake and in the organizations wasn't high. So just dumping tools on people and then expecting the productivity gains to come is not realistic. And I've often been thinking that AI has been sold as the silver bullet solution because of these huge valuations, like the 156 billion valuation of OpenAI before last week, and we'll come on to that. We don't know what the valuation may have dropped significantly since DeepSeek took over the mantle of most popular AI app. But, you know, there's a lot of vested interest in those tech firms telling you this is the future, trying to push that you're moving behind the curve. What I say to organizations of all sizes, particularly mid-sized businesses who don't maybe have huge integration departments looking at this every day, is think about slow AI. You know, you need to be on top of knowing what's going on and where this might impact you. You need to start preparing, but you don't need to do it all the way. And when you're bored and C-suite are saying, when are the productivity gains going to happen? And when are we going to be able to cut this person or replace this role? You can say, we are going to wait. And that doesn't mean stop. It means working on AI transformation. So observing, looking at all the signals that are out there, understanding the trends, and then thinking, how does this apply to our organization? You don't need to be overwhelmed with every single change that's happening every day. Right now, most organizations just need to be thinking, how does this fit into our existing workflows? What are the repeatable activities that we do all the time that could be subject to automation? If we go down the automation path, then we can start looking at system design. How do we do that using responsible AI principles? How do we avoid bias? What are then the right technologies and tools that we need to use? So don't worry about which tool is trending here and there. That might be great for people in the tech space, in the consulting space, to know on a blow-by-blow account, like myself and perhaps you, Reggie. But most people, as humans, and most organizations don't need to be moving so fast. So do not worry. And as the McKinsey report apparently shows, uptake may be okay. We're starting to see uptake in some reports going up to 75% in some extent. But on the ground, perhaps people aren't really using the tools. They perhaps aren't really getting the benefits. And also, I think those benefits are massively overhyped. So we do see a piece of research I saw recently said a lot of the code that comes out, which is one of the best use cases for generative AI, is very, very high error rates, full of bugs and issues. And again, there's a lot of hype cycle there about replacing developers. Google claim that 25% of their code base is now AI, and they're going to be cutting lots and lots of developers. Goldman Sachs have said productivity gain from coding is 10%. That seems like a more realistic figure now. 10%, that's really, you can put put your pins on that and say, okay, 10% feels tangible. And that means that, of course, Goldman Sachs are probably going to recruit 10% less developers. That efficiency will come, but remember, a lot of the technologies, and because they're not embedded in work practices, yes, and they're not taking a people-first approach to how the technologies are used in the business, that's why they're not working. So, hey, if people don't understand what the technology is for, or they're worried that perhaps this technology is going to replace them, then we're starting to see disengagement in the workplace. And my work is all about that. It's about how you bring people on that journey and avoid that fatigue that people are feeling about, particularly AI, but also other automation and other types of technologies coming into the workplace today.
Absolutely brilliant, Susie. Yeah, you've now got a lot of things there to unpack. But yeah, 100% huge. These companies feeding the hype cycle, beginning to do things. How does that filter down into the actual workplace and people's lives day to day? And yes, no policies in place, but beginning to. And yeah, how do you have a cohesive sort of system that's actually going to help people on their day to day and do their work more efficiently? But yeah, I think all of this will play out so embryonic. The McKinsey report, as I said, is just straight out. Putting it into context that you always do, it is a report. It's obviously going to be selling some of McKinsey's own services, no doubt. McKinsey have said this, we must get this. You know,
or as someone who will remain nameless but is a big influence on my thinking says, McKinsey, the clock The stop clock is right twice a day. So I personally, I would
Mm.
be putting McKinsey at the top of my thinking around this, because I think there's probably quite a bit of bias in terms of their responsible AI practices. They're trying to build that up. I'm trying to build up those
Indeed.
services. Personally, if you're going to take any advice on board, there's two sources. I might be a cheeky third here. I
Mhm.
would say Gartner
Indeed,
is
indeed.
very, very, very strong. They have some very good webinar and research series that are really well considered and do seem to take both hands in terms of the positive and the negative. So Gartner would be my preferred source. Boston Consulting Group have some interesting things, but again, I think there's some bias in terms of their hyping their responsible AI selling. And then Ethan Mollick is a very, very good source. He's a professor and has some great thinking about the implementation of AI. And my cheeky third would be my own newsletter, Rethinking the Hype Cycle, where I digest a lot of the big stories happening in tech and take a people first approach to what you can practically do to implement it in your business.
Really good, really good. I love the shameless plug at the end there. And we're going to be talking about that. I think there's a special offer for people who are actually listening in. So absolutely good point. And let's put the links to those people in the show notes. So absolutely wonderful. So yeah, so let's now move on to another topic that's we've been talking about, Stargate, the Stargate project, which came out with a big fanfare last week. DJT and some of his tech bros were out there hyping it up a little bit. Then along comes this little company called DeepSeek, and lots of other things start happening. For all the people out there, what is Stargate and what is its role? And it seems very kind of vague at the moment.
Yeah,
And
I was reflecting on the week. We say a week is a long time in AI. It was actually on
Mm,
the Tuesday that Stargate was launched, week Tuesday, the 20th of January.
mm,
Yeah, it's got that. It's a 1990s sci-fi film series, I believe,
I
Stargate film
remember it.
franchise. So slightly odd choice of name there, but we're thinking about what's going on in the politics of the US and the people also making decisions around this. Perhaps not a big surprise for sci-fi fans.
Mm,
So the idea is the leader of the American nation, I use the leader in strong, heavily inverted commas there, made the statement that we're going to invest 500 billion. It's going to create 100,000 jobs to make American AI great again. Fantastic. There's actually no federal money in there. It's a
mhm,
partnership between Oracle, Nvidia, and OpenAI. They claim to have put the money in. So effectively, I'd see that as a bit of a PR statement to bolster the US economy and build confidence in the market that AI investment is here and it's serious. But without
mm.
actually any federal support there, is very hard to see the impact it will have. And the cynics are also saying, well, actually, has the money been put in? Perhaps it's just been apportioned from something else.
Yes.
Is all this extra money coming in? But we are seeing investors are pouring and pouring money into AI, and those chips that NVIDIA produce, which make AI models run faster in simple terms, cost a huge, eye-watering $40,000 per chip. So the
Wow.
tiny, weeniest little
Mm,
computer chip, $40,000. Now, what has happened on the other side of the world in China is that they thought that only NVIDIA could produce these chips, and anyone who had access to these chips, and Biden was banning the export of those
mm.
as well before the new presidency kicked in. Again, about trade controls here of saying, well, we want this technology for ourselves and we can't produce it there. Very, very difficult when these chips are manufactured in where? Taiwan, a rather
Yeah.
contentious place for our friends in China. But China was developing their own technology on the other side, very, quite overtly, and there was lots of publicity around all of this, the
Mm,
Chinese AI firms, and they weren't taken seriously. Now, around about December, the tech nerds who really look into these AI models and compare them and run tests were starting to say, hey, look, this one here, DeepSeek, it's doing pretty good. It was actually originally launched a couple of years ago. But what happened and the change that happened around December was they launched a new model, the R1. And when
mm.
these comparative tests are done, and a lot of weight is put on these tests for comparing how they do different parts of reasoning and content creation and code creation. So these rigorous tests are run to compare the efficiency and outputs of different models in a very technical way. I couldn't explain it to you, Reggie, because
Yeah.
it's
No, indeed,
beyond my
indeed.
technology pay grade there. But this new model, DeepSeek's R1, was starting to get very comparable performance to OpenAI. So that started routing. People started testing it, downloading it. And suddenly, over that weekend, so the Tuesday of the Stargate announcement, by the Monday, this new app, DeepSeek, was the most downloaded AI app in the App Store. Now, why? I had a little play around with it. It's not vastly different, but the main thing is price point. So they've been able to produce this technology, they claim, for about $5 to $6 million. That's in training, not in the organizational costs. And that is a fraction of the billions that it takes OpenAI to do pretty much the same thing. And they actually had chips that they were good enough. Now, what's really interesting here is we start to see this big rhetoric with the AI firms getting big investments saying, we need more power. We need to even build more nuclear power stations because of all the electricity that AI needs to power our economy. So it was all about this growth, investment, big. And on the other side, it's a David and Goliath moment. We've got the Davids out there in China. We're saying, well, actually, if we produce a bit of a more scaled down chip, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to use less energy. It's going to use less what you call compute power and less tokens to do the same thing. So my very layperson understanding between the differences is that OpenAI is more like a generalist model. It goes out there and asks everything when you put a query into a chat GPT, whereas DeepSeek will be using a more narrow approach, using more specialist expertise, as it were, for that query. So it might not help you with what you call reasoning when it's a very complex problem that you want to solve. But if it's a more narrow problem, which, let's face it, is most of the use cases, we say, go and summarize this meeting notes, analyze this data for me. We're looking at one task per time. And in fact, most AIs can't cope with too much at the same time. So it's already narrowing down what it's prepared to do in each encounter and each time that you search or ask it for a prompt. But that means it's far more efficient. So for me, I'm so excited about this because it means that a lot of the damaging effects of AI can be mitigated, particularly climate change and environment. Now, let's not kid ourselves. AI is never going to be a green technology, just as actually the internet and search isn't. We've just conveniently buried this fact away that data centers are so much of the electricity output now in our societies. But just imagine if we can do it with a 20th of the energy consumption. That's amazing. And the cost basis. So America and the big AI firms, they're going to be frightened right now. The share prices, they lost $1 trillion on the tech stocks.
Yes, biggest loss ever in corporate history in one day.
Absolutely. But the gains have been huge over the last year. So again, like we as individual businesses, we don't need to worry about that. We're not Nvidia, unless you're me and you had a lot of shares in Nvidia, and that was a painful day. But but we have to just think, well, what does this mean for us? And actually, potentially a huge advantage. So I see a world now which could be very divided from an AI landscape. We already see much heavier regulation in the EU with the EU AI Act. America want to have a very loose, almost deregulation of both the internet and then AI, which is very, very risky, as any ethicist will tell you. There's huge risks with that kind of deregulation. But it may well happen anyway, because that's the nature of the way the politics are going across many of those countries. So we could see a very divided state where Europe's very locked down in how you can use AI. We might see fines being imposed soon for misuse. We might see America pushing against that and trying to push against Europe's regulation. But then we could also see this divide where certain countries are going to have to decide, do we want this more affordable tech that's been developed out there, particularly in China? And maybe it'll come from other countries as well over time. Will that push the prices down and the efficiencies and the technologies down so others in other nations compete? And will we start to see, we're already seeing risks of data and privacy. So DeepSeek is easy to hack. It's been leaking conversations. Do not put private business confidential information in there. But I would also say right now, don't put any unless you're very, very clear that you've got an enterprise AI that's locked down. Do not. So just treat it as something like we're having a conversation now. You're okay with some of this data if it was published on your website. You're okay with it. It's not too much. In that case, go ahead, knock yourself out, start testing these different tools. But we could see a world where certain tools are banned, and we've already seen the US trying to ban TikTok. This is the next level. Imagine these AIs will soon have access to all of our private information, where we're going, what we're thinking. It'll have access to a lot of business and confidential information about our trading and our corporate secrets, particularly our plans, if we don't use it correctly. That's very, very powerful. But you could say Google's had access to a lot of this information already for us for decades, and they've been monetizing it and selling it. But I think there will be regulation here, which will potentially ban, as we started to see that with even Huawei were ripped out of 5G networks, despite the fact their technology was superior.
Indeed.
It was more affordable, and it actually left parts of America without 5G as a result of that decision. So we do see that politics will play a strong role in what happens to business here, as it's always done. But particularly here, we might see that the global South countries are prepared to say, we don't want to work with anything from China or Russia, for example. Russia's fairly irrelevant in the AI discussion, but China is very, very prescient here. So if we do start to see those dividing lines appearing, and we could find actually that the other countries run ahead, and I'm very excited by the fact that a social enterprise could start to use these tools and afford them. That, people in developing countries, they're crying out for AI in sub-Saharan Africa. They see us as their future for growth. And God bless them, if we can make this technology as cheap and as accessible as possible, this opens up huge opportunities. It can be like the birth of the internet. And, I think it's really, really brave and exciting times. But in a divided world, this could play out. We just don't know. We just don't know.
But that's a very, very positive note to kind of round this up on, because we once again, sadly, Susie, with so much to discuss, we're going to have to do another part 3 on this. Yes. I think this could be an ongoing thing because there's so much information. Susie, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's the first time I've really understood the whole, DeepSeek stuff and the actual how it joins up and what actually happened. A lot of people talk about it at a very superficial kind of light touch level, but that has been very, very interesting in how it all sort of blends together. So as we just round off, you mentioned a newsletter. Tell us a little bit more about that. When is it coming out, etc., etc.?
Yeah, it's just
how can people get in touch with you?
It's just been soft launched. So last year I was running a newsletter called Responsible AI Leaders, or RAIL. I love my acronyms. I've moved on a little bit because my business practice is a little bit broader now, and I've launched a new Substack newsletter. It's called Rethinking the Hype Cycle. We'll share the link. I'm just working out how we give your readers an offer, but certainly I can personally give people offers if they've said they've come from perspectives. So you can sign up and get in touch with me, but I'm going to try and work out whether I can give you a special link or a free subscription. There'll be many free posts, and if you like those, then as I say, if you're a prospective reader, you can get in touch, and there will always be an offer for you. But it's all about, effectively, the newsletter is all about demystifying a lot of what's happening. There's going to be a fortnightly digest of what's happening in the world of tech and thought pieces about how you apply that to your business. And our subscribers will also get access to a quarterly trends report with me. And founding members can even get some one-to-one time. So it's a really good deal. Hopefully an accessible way that you can access some of my expertise and keep on top of the hype if you want to be more people-centered in your AI adoption.
Wonderful. Absolutely love it. And how can people get hold of you, Susie?
I am most active at the moment on Blue Sky. I'm Susie O'Neill, Susie without an E. I'm fairly active still on LinkedIn. Those are my main channels. And also my consultancy is called Eva. And we'll share the link, but it's evadigitaltrust.com. You can contact me through that website as well. I'm available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, or any opportunity. So what I'm doing this year is going out and inspiring businesses about what's happening with new tech trends. But particularly, I'm still talking about an issue that is again, unfortunately, getting less priority now, but about the adoption gaps in AI. So we do see that women and people of colour are less likely to benefit from AI, and why that is and what we can do about it. So DEI should not be off the table, in my opinion, in your workplace if you want to make sure that the benefits are evenly distributed of new technologies. Also, these topics are really important to surface.
Susie, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We will put all those links in the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure again. And thanks everyone for tuning in. See you again soon. Bye.
Bye.